She was invisible. Just another face serving tables at a fancy restaurant in Miami. But when a billionaire laughed at her and asked what a nobody like her thought about his $600 million deal, she said 5 words that made every fork at that table stop moving. 5 words that would bring a corrupt empire crashing down. 5 words that would expose the man who destroyed her life. She said, "You're being set up." You see, that billionaire had no idea. The woman in the cheap uniform carrying his coffee? She used to design buildings that touched the sky. She had one of the most brilliant minds in the entire country. Until 3 years ago, when her mentor betrayed her, framed her for his crimes, and forced her to disappear. For 3 years, she served soup to people who didn't even see her face. For 3 years, she watched the man who destroyed her get richer and more powerful. For 3 years, she waited. And on this one night, everything changed. This is the true story of a woman who lost everything and fought her way back from nothing. A story about betrayal, survival, and the sweetest revenge you'll ever hear. Stay with me until the end, because what she does next is absolutely brilliant. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been knocked down, if you've ever wanted justice, this story is for you. Welcome to Reality Untold Stories. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Section 1. The Fall, 1,000 Words. Let me tell you about a woman named Sarah. Just Sarah. No fancy title, no impressive job description. For the past 3 years, she'd been serving tables at a high-end restaurant in downtown Miami called the Golden Pearl. You know the type of place I'm talking about, where people spend more on one meal than most families spend on groceries in a month. Sarah was good at being invisible. Really good. She moved quietly between tables, never made mistakes, never drew attention. That's what happens when you're trying to hide from your past. You learn to blend into the background like wallpaper. But here's what nobody knew. Sarah hadn't always carried plates for a living. 3 years ago, she had a completely different life. A life where she wore expensive suits instead of a server's uniform. A life where she was respected, admired even. Back then, Sarah worked as a senior architect for one of the biggest construction firms in Florida. Her specialty? Designing large commercial buildings, shopping centers, hotels. She had a gift for it. She could look at an empty piece of land and see exactly what it could become. Her designs saved her company millions of dollars while creating beautiful, functional spaces. Her boss was a man named Thomas Bradford. Thomas wasn't just her boss. He was her mentor. The man who'd given her a chance when she was fresh out of architecture school. The man who taught her everything about the business. She trusted him completely. She thought of him almost like family. Sarah had created something special for Thomas. A revolutionary building design system that used artificial intelligence to optimize construction costs while maintaining safety and beauty. It was brilliant. It made Thomas his first $100 million on a single project. Then one day, Sarah noticed something strange in the project files. Money was disappearing. Small amounts at first, hidden in construction budgets. But when she dug deeper, she found the truth. Thomas had been stealing for years. Overcharging clients, pocketing the difference, hiding money in offshore accounts. Millions and millions of dollars. She was 27 years old and believed in doing the right thing. So she went to Thomas, thinking he'd thank her for catching his mistake. Thinking he'd fix it. Instead, Thomas destroyed her. Within a week, federal investigators showed up at Sarah's door. But they weren't there for Thomas. They were there for her. Someone had planted evidence in her email accounts. Fake contracts with her signature. Bank accounts in her name filled with stolen money. Thomas had spent months setting up the perfect frame, and she'd walked right into it. Who would they believe? A 27-year-old junior architect, or Thomas Bradford, whose face was on billboards all over Miami. A man who donated to charity, who shook hands with the mayor, who was featured in architecture magazines. Sarah tried to fight. She hired a lawyer with what little savings she had. But Thomas had an army of attorneys. Within 2 months, her lawyer told her the truth. She was going to prison for crimes she didn't commit. So Sarah ran. She took the $3,000 left in her bank account, changed her name using her grandmother's maiden name, and disappeared into the city. She found a cheap apartment in a rough neighborhood. She got a job as a server. The brilliant architect became just another face in the crowd. For 3 years, she lived in fear. Every time she saw a police car, her heart stopped. Every time someone looked at her too long, she wondered if they recognized her face from the news. She watched Thomas get richer and more famous. She saw his buildings rising higher and higher into the Miami skyline. Buildings she should have been designing. Every night, she went home to her tiny apartment and wondered if this was her life now. Forever. Hiding. Serving. Invisible. She told herself she was surviving. But really, she was just slowly disappearing. Until one evening in late October, everything changed. That night, the restaurant's most exclusive private dining room was reserved for a man named Jonathan Hayes. Jonathan wasn't just rich. He was powerful. His real estate development company, Hayes Properties, owned half of downtown Miami. When Jonathan Hayes decided to build something, the entire city paid attention. And that night, sitting in that private room, Jonathan Hayes was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. Sarah just didn't know it yet. But she was about to stop being invisible. She was about to remember who she really was. And 5 simple words would change everything. The private dining room was loud with laughter and expensive wine. Jonathan Hayes sat at the head of the table, surrounded by his son-in-law David and 2 businessmen who hung on his every word. They were celebrating. Jonathan had just finalized plans to purchase the Meridian Resort Complex, a massive beachfront property, for $600 million. $600 million. The number made Sarah's head spin as she balanced 4 heavy plates on her arm, walking past their table. She'd done this thousands of times. The weight didn't bother her anymore. Her body knew how to carry the burden. Then David noticed her. He was drunk and bored, and he had a mean streak. "Hey, Uncle John," he said loudly, his voice carrying across the room. "You always say you want to hear from everyday people. Why don't you ask her?" He pointed at Sarah like she was furniture. "Ask the server what she thinks about your big deal. I'm sure she's got some really valuable insights from the kitchen." The whole table erupted in laughter. Jonathan leaned back, a cruel smile spreading across his face. He read her name tag. "Sarah," he said, making sure everyone nearby could hear. "You bring food and clean up after rich people. What's your expert opinion on a $600 million real estate deal?" Time seemed to stop. Sarah stood there, her back to them, her plates balanced perfectly on her left arm. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest. She should have said nothing. Should have smiled politely and walked away. Let them have their laugh. That's what she'd been doing for 3 years. Staying quiet. Staying hidden. But then Jonathan mentioned a name. Thomas Bradford. He said Thomas had been interested in the Meridian property too. Said Thomas had backed out at the last minute, which made the deal even sweeter. Something inside Sarah broke. Or maybe something that had been broken finally healed. She turned around slowly. She didn't look at Jonathan. She looked at the blueprints and contracts sticking out of his briefcase on the chair beside him. "You're being set up," she said quietly. The laughter died instantly. The entire restaurant seemed to go silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Jonathan sat up straight. The cruel smile disappeared. "What did you just say?"
His voice was different now.
Not playful. Dangerous. Sarah met his eyes. For 3 years, she'd hidden her intelligence, hidden who she really was. But these men had said Thomas's name. They'd reminded her of the woman she used to be. Her voice was steady now.
Strong.
"I said you're being set up. You think you're buying a valuable resort complex. But you're really buying a disaster waiting to happen. Thomas Bradford isn't your competitor. He's your enemy. And he's using this deal to destroy you." A fork clattered onto a plate. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Jonathan Hayes stared at the server, who had just said 5 words that changed his world. "Keep talking," Jonathan said. His voice had completely changed. The joking was over. This was the voice of a man who sensed real danger. Sarah carefully set down her plates. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. After 3 years of hiding, she felt something she hadn't felt in so long. She felt like herself. "The Meridian Resort looks perfect on paper," she said. "But all the real value has been stripped away. The property has massive structural problems that were hidden in a subsidiary company called Coastal Holdings. Thomas has been working with a previous owner for months. They've been lying about what the property is actually worth." Jonathan's face went pale. "Coastal Holdings," he whispered. "That's buried deep in the paperwork. Page 400-something. Nobody looks that far." "Thomas is counting on that," Sarah continued. "His plan is simple. Let you complete the purchase. Then 6 weeks later, engineering reports will come out showing the main building needs $100 million in emergency repairs. The beachfront is eroding and needs another $50 million in seawall work. Suddenly your $600 million property is worth half that, and you're hemorrhaging money trying to fix it." She took a breath. "And while you're desperate and bleeding money, Thomas will launch a takeover bid. He doesn't want the Meridian Resort. He wants your entire company. He wants Hayes Properties. And he wants to buy it for pennies while you're weak and broken." The silence at the table was complete. David's mouth was hanging open. The two businessmen looked terrified. Jonathan reached into his pocket with a shaking hand. He pulled out a black credit card and threw it on the table. "David, pay the entire bill. You 2-inch," he pointed at his business associates. "Get out. You're fired. Get out of my sight." "Jonathan, what's happening?" one of them stammered. "Get out," Jonathan roared. The three men scrambled away from the table like scared children. Jonathan turned back to Sarah, and his eyes were sharp and calculating. "You have 10 seconds to decide," he said. "My car is outside. You're coming with me. If you refuse, I will have this restaurant closed by tomorrow morning, and I will find you anyway." "Who are you really?" Sarah took off her apron and dropped it on the table. After 3 years of running, she was done hiding. "My name is Sarah Mitchell," she said. "And Thomas Bradford didn't just compete with me. He's the man who destroyed my entire life." The ride in Jonathan's car was silent. Sarah stared out the window at the lights of Miami blurring past. She was wearing her cheap server's uniform, sitting in a car that cost more than most people's houses. They arrived at Hayes Tower, a massive glass building that seemed to touch the clouds. Security guards stared at Sarah's uniform but said nothing when they saw Jonathan's expression. They took a private elevator to the top floor. Jonathan's office was enormous, with windows overlooking the entire city spread out like a blanket of lights below. "Lock this floor," Jonathan said to the empty room. A quiet electronic beep confirmed they were alone. He turned to face her. "Sarah Mitchell, the architect who supposedly embezzled $12 million from Bradford Construction. The woman who vanished before she could be arrested. You're a fugitive." "I was framed," Sarah said simply. There was no emotion in her voice. She'd said these words in her head 1,000,000 times, but nobody had ever listened. "Everyone says they were framed," Jonathan shot back. "Give me one reason to believe you." "I don't care if you believe me," Sarah said, walking to the enormous window. "You asked who I am. I told you. You asked how I know about your deal. I'm telling you. Thomas Bradford was my mentor. I built the design system that made him rich. Then I discovered he was using it to steal money from clients. When I confronted him, he framed me for his crimes. He had lawyers, fake evidence, everything. I was nobody. He was Thomas Bradford. So I ran." She turned to face Jonathan, and her eyes were blazing now. "For 3 years, I've been hiding. I've gone from designing buildings that touch the sky to serving soup to people who don't even see me. I've watched Thomas get more powerful, more celebrated, while I counted nickels and dimes in tips. And then tonight at your table, your son-in-law said his name. You talked about the deal. And I saw the documents in your briefcase." Sarah's voice grew stronger. "I know how Thomas thinks. I know how he operates because I taught him half of what he knows about design and construction. And when I looked at those papers tonight, I saw my own work. He's using the same trick he used to frame me. The same shell company structure, the same hidden contracts. He's so arrogant, he thinks nobody else can see it. But I can see it. I built this kind of system. I know exactly how it works. Jonathan walked to a cabinet and poured 2 glasses of water. He handed one to Sarah. If what you're saying is true, he said slowly, you just saved my company. But you also just confessed to being a wanted fugitive. Why would you risk exposing yourself? Sarah took a sip of water. Her hand was steady. Because Thomas used my work, my signature, my design philosophy. And because I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of being afraid. He took everything from me. My career, my reputation, my life. And I just watched him about to do the same thing to you, using my own playbook. She set down the glass. You asked who I am. I'm the woman Thomas Bradford fears most. I'm the only person alive who can prove what he really is. Jonathan Hayes studied this woman in her cheap uniform who spoke with the confidence of a general. All right, Sarah Mitchell. You want back in the game? You're in. But understand this. My own company believes in this deal. Some of my own people might be working for Thomas. You'll be fighting not just him, but possibly my own employees. Sarah smiled for the first time. It was a cold smile. A warrior's smile. Give me a computer, she said. Give me 72 hours. I'll prove everything. Jonathan picked up his phone. I'm calling my head of operations. We're going to the office. Right now. Sarah nodded. The war had begun. And this time, she wasn't running. The operations center at Hayes Properties was on the 75th floor. This was where dozens of brilliant analysts worked day and night, reviewing construction plans, financial projections, market analyses. When Jonathan Hayes stepped out of the elevator at 3 a.m. with a woman in a server's uniform, every person in the room stopped working and stared. Listen up. Jonathan's voice commanded instant silence. This is Sarah Mitchell. She's a special consultant. She has my complete authority. Give her whatever she needs. Full access to all Meridian Resort files. Everything. A sharp-looking woman in an expensive suit stood up. Her name was Rebecca Stone, and she was Jonathan's head of operations. She looked at Sarah like someone had just dragged garbage into her pristine office. A special consultant? Rebecca's voice dripped with contempt. Jonathan, with all respect, who is this person? She's the person who's going to tell us if we're about to walk off a cliff, Jonathan said. Get her access.
Now.
Rebecca, her face tight with anger, led Sarah to an empty computer station.
Here.
We'll set up your security clearance. It might take a while. I don't need a new login, Sarah said, sitting down. Her fingers were already flying across the keyboard. Just give me guest access. I can work with that. Guest access won't get you into the encrypted Meridian files, Rebecca said with a smug smile. She thought she'd won. 30 seconds later, Sarah was looking at files that should have been impossible to access. Rebecca's face went white. The other analysts watching took a step back, shocked. Lock my station, Sarah said, not looking up. Nobody sees my screen. Get me coffee. Black. And I need the original paper copies of all Meridian financial statements. The actual physical documents. I want to see the real paper. For the next 8 hours, Sarah was a storm of motion. She wasn't just reading the data. She was living inside it. She cross-referenced international building permits. She pulled up satellite images of the Meridian Resort and discovered that half the structures were damaged far worse than reported. She found the hidden subsidiary companies. She traced the flow of money. The other analysts tried to work, but they kept stealing glances at this strange woman who moved through their systems, like she'd built them herself. Jonathan watched from his office above the floor. He could see Rebecca and another man, Philip Chin, his chief financial officer, huddled in the corner, whispering and shooting angry looks at Sarah. Sarah was deep in the numbers, tracing everything. The fake engineering reports, the hidden structural damage, the shell companies. But there was one final piece missing. The smoking gun that would prove Thomas's entire scheme. And it was protected by encryption she'd never seen before. It's not here, she whispered to herself, frustration mounting. The sun was starting to rise outside the windows, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Rebecca approached Sarah's desk, her smile confident and cruel. Having trouble, consultant? Maybe you've hit a wall. Some of us have been working on this for months. We're very confident in our analysis. You're confident because you're looking at exactly what Thomas wants you to see, Sarah said quietly. Then she stopped. She leaned back and rubbed her tired eyes. The encryption wasn't just a password. It needed a specific person in a specific location to unlock the final file. Sarah looked at Rebecca's smug face. Then she looked at Philip across the room, watching them nervously. Jonathan had mentioned that Philip was the one who had approved the engineering reports. A terrible, brilliant idea formed in Sarah's mind. "You're right, Rebecca," Sarah said suddenly. "I am at a dead end. I can't find the final proof." Rebecca's smile grew wider. "I'm sorry to hear that. I'll let Jonathan know you tried your best. But you know what's interesting?" Sarah continued casually. "While I was searching, I found something completely unrelated. Just a curiosity, really. There are monthly payments in Hayes's internal system. Same amount every month for 8 months, from something called Sunshine Consulting." Rebecca's smile froze on her face. "These payments go to a private account," Sarah continued, pretending to study her screen. "And the bank routing number looks familiar. It's the same bank you use for your paycheck, Rebecca." Rebecca stopped breathing. "So I looked up who owns Sunshine Consulting," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It's hidden behind several companies. But at the end of that chain is Thomas Bradford." The color drained from Rebecca's face. "You're the head of operations, Rebecca. You're the one person who could have buried all the red flags about the Meridian deal. And you've been getting paid very well to do exactly that." Sarah stood up, her voice calm but powerful. "But here's the thing. You're not just getting paid. You're the key. That encrypted file needs you to unlock it. You're Thomas's inside agent." "This is insane," Rebecca whispered, but her voice was shaking. "I'm calling security." "Go ahead," Sarah said calmly. "But while I was digging, I froze that Sunshine account and sent all the records to the Securities and Exchange Commission. Your insurance policy is gone, Rebecca. You have one chance to save yourself. Unlock that file. Show me the truth." Rebecca looked around the room. Every analyst was staring at her now. Philip looked like he might faint. Jonathan was standing at his office door, his face like stone. Rebecca was trapped. Her betrayal was exposed for everyone to see. With shaking hands, she walked to her own computer. She placed her thumb on a scanner and typed a long password. On Sarah's screen, a new folder appeared. Project Demolition. Sarah opened it, and her heart sank. It was worse than she thought. Not just structural damage. Criminal negligence. Falsified safety reports. Evidence that people could die if this deal went through. She was about to open the final document when a voice echoed across the silent floor. "Well, well. Sarah Mitchell." Sarah's blood turned to ice. She turned around slowly. Standing by the elevator, wearing a $1,000 suit and a cruel smile, was Thomas Bradford. "I thought you were serving coffee," he said. "This is quite the career change." The room felt like all the oxygen had been sucked out. Sarah hadn't seen Thomas in 3 years. 3 years of hiding, of fear, of shame. And now here he was, standing 20 feet away, smiling at her like this was all a wonderful joke. Jonathan stepped forward, putting himself between Thomas and Sarah. "Bradford, you're not welcome here. Get out." "Oh, I think I am welcome," Thomas said smoothly. He gestured toward Philip and Rebecca. "Tell Jonathan what you told me last night. Tell him this deal is solid. Tell him his server is feeding him lies." Philip, seeing a chance to save himself, nodded quickly. "He's right, Jonathan. This woman is a known criminal. She's trying to sabotage the biggest deal in this company's history." "You're a liar, Philip," Jonathan growled. "Am I?" Thomas interrupted. "Or is she? Think about it, Jonathan. Her word against your chief financial officer, your head of operations, and the top engineering firms in the state. Who do you think your board will believe?" Sarah had been silent, her hands gripping the edge of her desk. She looked at Thomas, the man who had been like a father to her, the man who had destroyed her life. "You're right, Thomas," Sarah said quietly. "The evidence is circumstantial. It's just noise." Jonathan looked at her, shocked and disappointed. Thomas's smile was blinding. He thought he'd won. I only have one thing left, Sarah said. She reached under the desk and pulled out her old worn bag. When I ran for my apartment, federal agents took my computers, my phones, everything. But they missed one thing. She unzipped a side pocket and pulled out a small external hard drive. Thomas's smile started to fade. His eyes fixed on that drive. This is my backup, Sarah said. From 3 years ago. Before you framed me. You see, Thomas, I was a very good architect. I backed up everything, including the original design system I built for you. And I backed up the original scheme you used to frame me. She held up the drive. You made one fatal, arrogant mistake. You're not running a new scheme. You're running the exact same scheme again. She plugged the drive into her computer. On her screen, she split the display into 2 columns. On the left, the design from 3 years ago. On the right, the current Meridian project. They were identical, line for line, number for number. The same hidden flaws, the same shell companies, the same pattern. It's not my word against yours anymore, Thomas, Sarah said. It's your own signature.
Twice.
It's a confession written in blueprints. And this time, it has your name on it, not mine. Thomas's face went white. He stared at the screen, at the 2 perfect columns of matching evidence, and he knew his life was over. Jonathan's voice was cold and final. Rebecca. Philip. You're fired. Security will escort you to the police waiting in the lobby. As the guards dragged them away, Jonathan turned to Thomas. You tried to poison me with my own money, and you used the one person who could stop you as a joke. He picked up his phone. I'm calling the authorities right now. The Meridian deal is dead. And you're finished. Thomas lunged desperately at Sarah. You destroyed me. He never reached her. Jonathan's security stopped him instantly. Sarah watched the man who had haunted her nightmares lying on the floor, broken and defeated. After 3 years of hiding, 3 years of fear, 3 years of being invisible, she had won. But as the adrenaline faded, Sarah started shaking. The war was over, but could she really come back to this world? Jonathan walked over to her. The job is yours, Sarah. Head of Design Strategy, Hayes Properties. Build your own team. Name your price. And I'll fund your lawsuit. We'll use this evidence. We'll get your name back. We'll get everything back. Sarah looked at his outstretched hand. Then she looked at the operations floor, the screens, the lights. The world that had once been her home. Her hand was shaking as she reached out and took his. The trial was fast. The newspapers called it the server's revenge, and Sarah hated that headline. She wasn't defined by her worst moment. She was a brilliant architect who had set a perfect trap and won. Thomas faced mountains of evidence. The 2 sets of identical designs, laid side by side, were impossible to deny. He pleaded guilty to everything. The judge gave him 35 years in federal prison. Sarah walked out of that courthouse, ignoring the camera flashes. Her face was calm. The war was finally over. 6 months passed. Sarah was now the head of design strategy at Hayes Properties, one of the most powerful positions in Miami real estate. She had a corner office. She wore designer suits. She had a salary that made her old self dizzy. But the victory wasn't just about the money or the title. It was about something deeper. Sarah worked hard, rebuilding the company's systems, creating new safeguards against fraud. She designed beautiful buildings again. She was respected. She was feared. But slowly, gradually, she learned to trust again. One evening, 8 months after Thomas's arrest, Sarah stood on the rooftop of Hayes Tower. The city spread out below her like a map of stars. She held a paper cup of black coffee from a regular coffee shop, a habit from her server days that she refused to give up. The elevator opened, and Jonathan stepped out carrying expensive wine and crystal glasses. A toast, he said, to victories that matter. Sarah looked at the fancy wine, then at her simple coffee cup. She didn't reach for the glass. I'm not really a wine person, Jonathan. He paused, then smiled. You know what? Me neither. He set both glasses down untouched. He leaned against the railing beside her. The board approved your new safety division. Your bonus is, well, let's just say it's substantial. Sarah nodded.
Good.
We'll need it. I still see problems in the port project. Jonathan laughed. Always working. We just brought down a giant, Sarah. We rewrote your life. Tell me, how does it feel? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, looking at the city lights. It feels, she finally said, her voice barely a whisper, like I can finally breathe. Like I've been holding my breath for 3 years, and I just let it out. She turned to him. When I was Sarah Mitchell the first time, I was the prodigy. I was defined by what I could do. Then I was nobody, the victim. I was defined by what was done to me. She looked at her reflection in the dark glass. I don't think I'm either of them anymore. Those were roles I was forced to play. Who are you then? Jonathan asked. Sarah took a slow sip of coffee. I'm the woman who learned that small details matter most. I'm the woman who checks everything twice. I'm the woman who survived. She smiled. A real, genuine smile. And the next time you want my architectural advice, Mr. Hayes, it's going to cost you a lot more than a dinner reservation. Jonathan laughed. I'm counting on it, Miss Mitchell. Sarah looked out at Miami. 3 years ago, she had served the city. Now she was building it. She didn't just work in the real estate world anymore. She had mastered it. They had all looked at her but never seen her. They thought a name tag and a uniform could hide brilliance. They thought shame and fear could bury talent. They were wrong. Sarah Mitchell didn't just get her name back. She built a new one from the ashes of the fire that tried to burn her. She proved that intelligence cannot be hidden by circumstances. She proved that integrity is worth more than any amount of money. Jonathan had asked for her opinion as a joke. He found an ally who saved his empire. They thought she was just a server. They forgot that the woman serving coffee might be the smartest person in the room. And in the end, Sarah learned the most important lesson of all. You are not defined by what happens to you. You are defined by what you do next. The end. So, what do you think of Sarah's incredible journey? Do you think she got the justice she deserved? How would you have handled being betrayed like that? Let me know in the comments below. If this story moved you, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear about triumph over betrayal. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories every week. Thank you for watching.